I was wiping down windshields at a gas station when a woman driving a $180,000 BMW rolled up. The car shimmered black under the fluorescent lights, so pristine you could see your face in the hood. She got out wearing a suit that probably cost more than I'd earned in the last 3 months combined. "Excuse me, are you Frank Dawson's son?" she asked. "My father passed away broke 20 years ago." What she told me next made my hands shake so hard I dropped everything. The squeegee smacked against the concrete with a crack that rang out across the empty station. Blue cleaning solution splashed across my work boots, the cheap ones I'd picked up at Walmart after selling my Italian leather dress shoes just to cover rent. The woman didn't even blink at the mess. She just stood there, perfectly calm, clutching a leather briefcase like it held nuclear launch codes. "Frank Dawson, the mechanic who worked at Dawson's Auto Service on Maple Avenue," she said, her voice professional but kind. "Born 1943, passed away 2006. My throat tightened. Nobody had mentioned my father in years. Nobody in my current life even knew who he was. Here at the Shell station off Route 17, I was just Mike, the middle-aged guy who worked mornings and never griped about scrubbing the bathrooms. Not Michael Dawson, former owner of a $4 million logistics company. Definitely not the son of Frank Dawson, who died with less than $500 to his name. "Yeah, that was my dad," I said, straightening up despite the cleaning fluid seeping through my shoes. "But if you're here about some old debt or something, he's been gone 20 years. There's no estate. He left nothing." The woman smiled, not unkindly, but like someone about to reveal a royal flush. "Mr. Dawson, he left considerably more than nothing. My name is Karen Whitmore. I'm the executive assistant to David Whitaker, CEO of Whitaker Innovations. Your father made an investment with Mr. Whitaker in 1990. Investment. My father." 2 words that had never belonged in the same sentence. The man who patched our roof with flattened aluminum cans because he couldn't afford real shingles. Who drove the same pickup for 30 years, replacing parts with junkyard finds. Who ate bologna sandwiches for lunch every single day of my childhood because they were cheap and filling. "Lady, I think you've got the wrong Frank Dawson," I said, grabbing a roll of paper towels to mop up the spilled fluid. "My dad fixed cars for a living. He never had money to invest in anything except keeping our lights on, and sometimes not even that." She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a photograph. Old, slightly yellowed, but clear enough. There was my father, younger, grease under his fingernails even in the photo, standing next to a gorgeous classic car and a young guy in torn jeans. Both of them were grinning like they'd just hit the jackpot. "October 15, 1990, she said. "Your father took out a loan against his house to invest $12,000 in Mr. Whitaker's startup company, a 0.25% stake. Mr. Whitaker has been trying to locate your family for years to let you know that the investment has matured." The paper towels slipped from my hands. Behind me, I heard my coworker Louise holler, asking if I was all right. I wasn't all right. I was standing in a gas station at 6:47 in the morning wearing a stained uniform shirt with somebody else's name on it because they didn't have one in my size when I got hired, listening to a woman in a $1,000 suit tell me my father, who died in the same little house he'd bought in 1979, had somehow made an investment worth talking about. How much? The words barely made it out. Even if it was $60,000, even if it was just enough to get me out of the studio apartment I'd been renting since Laura took everything, it would be something. It would mean Dad had thought about the future in ways I never realized. Ms. Whitmore glanced around the empty gas station, at the flickering fluorescent light above pump 2 that had been busted for 3 weeks, at the handwritten, out of order, sign taped to the air machine, at me in my ill-fitting uniform with another man's name stitched on it. "Mr. Dawson," she said carefully, "I think you should sit down for this conversation, and you might want to call your manager about taking the rest of the day off. What I'm about to tell you is going to change everything." 6 months after my divorce was finalized, I stood behind the counter at a Shell station off Route 17, watching semis rumble past. The name tag reading, Mike, felt heavier than the construction equipment I used to coordinate shipments for. Some other Mike had worked here before me, quit after 2 weeks, and they never bothered ordering a new tag. Close enough, the manager had said. Everything in my life had become close enough lately. Close enough to surviving. Close enough to sane. Close enough to the man I used to be that my reflection didn't completely startle me anymore. My logistics company, Dawson Freight Systems, had grown from 2 trucks to a fleet of 50. $4 million in annual revenue. 12 years of 18-hour days building routes, negotiating contracts, sleeping in the office more nights than I cared to remember. I'd started it with nothing but a borrowed truck and a notebook full of contacts. By the time Laura's lawyer finished with me, it was like those 12 years had been wiped away. A magic trick in reverse, making everything vanish. Laura got all of it. The company, the house in Brookfield Hills, the investment accounts, even the vintage 1967 Mustang Fastback I'd been restoring with Emily on weekends. You'll never build anything again, she'd said outside the courthouse, her lawyer smirking beside her. Men like you get one shot, Michael. You just lost yours. She was wearing the diamond earrings I'd bought her for our 10th anniversary, back when I thought working harder meant loving better. The gas station job paid $12 an hour. After taxes and the garnishment for alimony, I took home about $320 a week. My studio apartment, a generous term for a converted garage behind a house in Oak Ridge, cost $850 a month. The math didn't add up, but nothing in my life added up anymore, so why should the numbers be any different? My brother Brian called every week from Tucson, where he ran a successful plumbing business. Come stay with us, Mikey. Regroup. This isn't you. But shame has a way of freezing you in place. How could I explain to my younger brother, who'd looked up to me our whole lives, that I couldn't even afford the gas money to drive to Tucson? That I'd sold my phone and was using a prepaid flip phone from the gas station? That some nights I ate the hot dogs that were about to expire rather than toss them out? My daughter Emily had chosen to live with her mother. The last real conversation we'd had was 3 months ago when she found out about the gas station job. Dad, you're starting to embarrass me, she'd texted. Mom says you're having some kind of breakdown. My friend saw you working there. Can't you get a real job? I wanted to tell her that this was a real job, that her grandfather would have said so, but Laura had already poisoned that well. Emily didn't even know the stories about Frank Dawson, the mechanic who could fix anything except his own poverty. The worst part wasn't the money or even losing the business. It was knowing my father would have been ashamed. Frank Dawson had worked as a mechanic for 36 years, never made more than $32,000 a year, but had held his head high. Honest work is noble work, Mikey, he'd say, grease under his fingernails, back aching from being under cars all day. He'd come home, scrub up with that gritty orange soap, and help me with homework at the kitchen table. You're going to be something special, he'd tell me. First Dawson to graduate college, first one to wear a tie to work. Now here I was, his college-educated son, fallen further than he'd ever been. At least he'd owned his garage, even if it barely broke even. At least he had Mom, who stood by him through every lean year. At least he had the dignity of being Frank Dawson, respected mechanic, not Mike, the guy who mops up coffee spills and restocks the energy drinks. My mother was in an assisted living facility now, her memory starting to fade. Medicare covered most of it, but not all. I hadn't visited in 2 months because I couldn't afford the gas money and couldn't stand to tell her why. Brian had been covering what Medicare didn't, another weight on my shame pile. The last time I'd seen her, she'd asked why I looked so tired. You work too hard, just like your father, she'd said, patting my hand. But at least he knew when to come home. I didn't have a home to come to anymore, just a converted garage with a hot plate and a mattress on the floor, where I lay awake most nights wondering how I'd fallen so far so fast. From CEO to cashier. From Michael to Mike. From somebody to nobody, scanning lottery tickets for people chasing dreams I'd already lost. 3 weeks into the gas station job, rock bottom found a basement. Laura sent photos of her vacation in Cabo, funded by my company's quarterly profits. There she was, raising a champagne glass on a yacht with the caption, "Living my best life," posted to the Facebook account I could only see because Louise let me use her phone during breaks. The worst part was seeing my former employees commenting, congratulating her on a well-deserved break. They didn't know she'd never worked a day at the company, never learned a single route, never spent a night reviewing contracts until 3 in the morning. My mother called from her assisted living facility that same day, confused about why I hadn't visited. "Your father would want you to keep fighting," she said, not knowing I'd already surrendered. The activity director had to dial for her now because she couldn't remember phone numbers anymore. "Mikey, are you eating enough? You sound thin." How do you tell your mother that you sound thin because defeat has a way of hollowing out your voice? Then came the morning that changed everything. Tuesday, 6:47 a.m., according to the security camera timestamp I'd later see. The morning shift was always the worst, dealing with contractors grabbing coffee and griping about gas prices, truckers paying with crumpled bills, teenagers stealing energy drinks when they thought I wasn't looking. I'd been up since 4, walking the 3 miles to work because my car had been repossessed 2 weeks earlier. A black BMW 7 Series pulled up to pump 3. Not unusual for this intersection where the poor side of town met the business district. What was unusual was the woman who stepped out. She looked like she'd walked out of a boardroom rather than rolled out of bed, a tailored suit that moved like water when she walked, shoes that clicked with authority on the concrete, checking a gold watch as if she had somewhere important to be. She filled her tank, premium unleaded, paying at the pump with a black credit card I'd only seen in magazines. Then she walked toward the station, straight toward me, not veering toward the restroom or the coffee machine, but directly to the counter where I stood prepping the morning inventory list. "Excuse me," she said, studying my face with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "This might sound strange, but are you Michael Dawson, son of Frank Dawson?" My chest tightened. Nobody here knew my last name. I was just Mike, the morning guy. "Who's asking?" "My name is Karen Whitmore. I'm executive assistant to David Whitaker." She paused, watching my reaction. "Your father did some work on Mr. Whitaker's car in 1990. A 1967 Mustang Fastback. My dad fixed a lot of cars." The defensive tone in my voice surprised me. 20 years after his death, I was still protecting his memory from strangers. "But he only invested in one person's company," she said, pulling out her phone. The screen showed a scanned document that made my breath catch, my father's shaky handwriting on a napkin, the kind from the diner where he ate lunch every Saturday. October 15, 1990. Frank Dawson invested $12,000 with David Whitaker for a 0.25% stake in Whitaker Innovations. "That's impossible," I said. "Dad never had $12,000 to invest in anything." The words came out harsher than I intended. "We ate beans and rice for dinner half the time. Mom mended clothes instead of buying new ones. 12,000 would have changed our lives. Mr. Whitaker says your father took out a loan against his house. Said he believed in giving chances to people who deserved them." The floor seemed to tilt under my feet. My parents almost lost that house in 1992. Mom still talks about how close they came to foreclosure. "You're telling me Dad risked our home for some stranger's startup?" Karen's expression softened, but her voice remained professional. "Your father never sold his stake, Mr. Dawson. He never even contacted us as the company grew. We tried to find him in 2008, but the addresses were outdated. It wasn't until Mr. Whitaker saw your picture in a trade publication 3 years ago that we made the connection, something about Dawson Freight Systems winning a Regional Excellence Award. I remembered that photo, standing in front of my fleet, confident and successful. Everything my father had dreamed I'd become, before Laura decided she deserved it more than I did. Even if this was real, Laura got everything in the divorce. Assets I didn't even know about would still belong to her now. Her lawyer made sure of that. Premarital investment inheritance isn't subject to divorce settlements, Karen interrupted. We've consulted our legal team extensively. Your father's investment was made before your marriage. The returns belong solely to you. The morning sun slanted through the grimy windows, highlighting the dust particles floating in the air. Outside, regular customers were starting their routines, unaware that inside, my world was tilting off its axis. Everything I thought I knew about my father, about why we struggled, about the choices he made, was suddenly in question. How much could it possibly be worth? I asked, my voice cracking like a teenager's. A couple $100,000. Even that seems impossible. $200,000 would solve every problem I had. Pay off the alimony, get a decent apartment, maybe even start another small business. I could visit my mother without shame, take my daughter to dinner without checking the prices first. Karen opened her briefcase on the counter, between the energy drinks and lottery tickets. The leather case looked absurdly out of place next to the scratch-offs promising instant riches that never came. Mr. Dawson, Whitaker Innovations went public in 2002. We've split 4 times. Your father's 0.25% stake, with reinvested dividends, accounting for market appreciation and compound growth over 36 years. She pulled out a portfolio statement, the paper heavy and official. As of market close yesterday, it's valued at $60 million. The coffee pot behind me shattered on the floor. I didn't remember dropping it. Didn't remember reaching for it. Didn't remember anything except the number she just said. Coffee spread across the linoleum like a dark lake, steaming in the morning air. My work boots were in the middle of it, but I couldn't move. 60 million. I repeated the words, foreign in my mouth. That's not possible. You're saying my father, who wore the same work boots for 5 years, who packed bologna sandwiches every day for 30 years, had $60 million. He had an investment worth that much, Karen corrected gently. But there's more. She pulled out a manila envelope from her briefcase. Your father left something with Mr. Whitaker. Instructions to give it to you if we ever found you, but only if you'd experienced what he called, a complete loss. Mr. Whitaker wasn't sure what that meant until he researched your recent situation. My hands trembled as I took the envelope. Dad's handwriting on the front, the same careful letters that had signed my report cards and birthday cards, for Mikey, when he's lost everything. I need to make a call, I said, my voice barely working. I dialed the manager's cell with shaking fingers. Rick, it's Mike. I have a family emergency. No, not my mother. Something else. I need to leave now. I'm sorry about the coffee maker. I'll explain later. Rick started to protest about the morning rush, but I hung up. For the first time in 6 months, I hung up on someone who had power over me. It felt like breathing after being underwater. Karen drove me to Whitaker Innovations headquarters, a glass tower I'd delivered supplies to 12 times without knowing. We'd hauled their office furniture during an expansion 2 years ago. Laura had complained about the traffic getting there. Now I sat in the passenger seat of Karen's BMW, watching the city change from tired strip malls to gleaming office buildings, from survival to success, from my new world back to my old one. Your father came to Mr. Whitaker's garage in 1990, Karen explained as she drove. Everyone else had turned him away. The Mustang was basically scrap metal. That sounds like Dad, I said, remembering all the customers he'd helped for free, all the times Mom had scolded him for being too soft. He never could turn away someone who needed help. When the car was finished, Mr. Whitaker tried to pay him. Your father refused, said the experience of working on such a beautiful machine was payment enough. That's when Mr. Whitaker told him about his idea for a technology company. He was 23, brilliant but broke. Your father listened to the whole pitch, then came back the next day with $12,000 in cash. Where did he get it? I asked. Second mortgage on your house, Karen said. He told Mr. Whitaker not to tell anyone, especially not your mother. Said she'd kill him if she knew. David Whittaker waited in a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. 58 years old, silver-haired, wearing jeans and a t-shirt despite running a billion-dollar company. The walls were covered with photos, and there in the center was one I'd never seen, my father, young and grinning, standing next to a perfectly restored 1967 Mustang Fastback. "Your father was the only one who believed in me," David said, shaking my hand with both of his. "Everyone else saw a kid with big dreams and empty pockets. Frank saw potential." He pushed a box across the conference table. Inside was the original napkin agreement, preserved under glass, and beneath it, the letter my father had written. The one Karen had mentioned. The one that would explain why Frank Dawson chose poverty over possibility. Why he risked everything and then kept it secret. Why he died with nothing but left me everything. I read my father's letter aloud, my voice breaking on the first line. "Mikey, if you're reading this, you've lost everything. Good. Now you'll understand why I stayed poor." David Whittaker sat quietly across from me, his hands folded on the conference table. Karen had stepped out to give us privacy. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioning and my voice shaking as I continued reading. I could have cashed out in 2002 when David's company went public. $6 million then. Your mother begged me to. We could have had a house with no mortgage, cars that actually started, college funds for you and Brian. God knows how many nights she cried about the bills, thinking I was asleep. I heard every one of those tears, Mikey. They nearly broke me. But I watched you that year, fresh out of college, working 3 jobs to start your company, sleeping in that old van between deliveries. You called me once at 2 in the morning, exhausted, asking if you were crazy to think you could build something from nothing. You were becoming something I never could be, a builder, a creator, a man who makes something from nothing. If I'd given you that money, you'd have built someone else's dream, not yours. You'd have been comfortable, not hungry. Rich kids don't work 18-hour days. They don't learn that failure is just education in disguise. They don't discover what they're really made of because they never have to dig that deep. So I stayed poor, kept fixing cars, kept that investment secret like a seed underground. David promised to find you when the time was right. Not when you were riding high, but when you'd lost everything. Because that's when money isn't a gift, it's a resurrection. That's when you'd understand what it really means. Your ex-wife was right about one thing. You'll never build anything again. You'll build everything. But this time, you'll know the difference between a fortune and a life, between success and character, between having money and being worth something. I stayed poor so you could become rich twice. Once in ambition, once in wisdom. The first fortune someone can take from you. The second, no one can touch. You earned both, son. The hard way, the only way that matters. Build something that matters this time. And when you do, remember, I didn't die broke. I died invested. P.S. Your mother doesn't know about this. Take care of her first. She's the one who convinced me to bet on David when everyone said he was just another dreams and schemes kid with a broken car. Funny how she was right about both of you. I set the letter down, my hands still trembling. The paper was worn at the edges, like my father had read it many times before sealing it. He wrote this 20 years ago, I said. David nodded. 3 months before he died. He came to my office, not the grand one we have now, but the small one we had downtown. Handed me this letter and made me promise to deliver it only when you'd lost everything. I asked him how I'd know. He said I'd know the same way he knew to invest in me. Sometimes you just recognize when someone's at the exact right moment for a miracle. All those years, I said, the anger and awe mixing in my chest. All those years of watching Mom worry about money, watching him work until his hands were too arthritic to hold tools properly. He could have ended it at any time. He could have. He could have, David agreed softly. I sent him statements every quarter. He never opened them. Sent them back with "return to sender" written in his handwriting. The only time he acknowledged the investment after 1990 was when he came to give me that letter. David pushed another box across the table. Inside was the original napkin agreement and a stack of unopened envelopes, 36 of them. Each one a quarterly statement my father had refused to read. On the back of one, in his handwriting, "Not yet." "He was a philosopher, your father," David said. "We talked for hours while he fixed that Mustang. He told me wealth wasn't about what you have, but about what you can build. Said most people get it backward, trying to get rich so they can become something, instead of becoming something and letting rich follow if it wants to. But he let my mother suffer," I said, the hurt fresh even after 20 years. "She worked double shifts as a nurse when her arthritis got bad. She mended our clothes with fabric from garage sales. She deserved better." "Did she?" David asked gently. "Or did she deserve a husband who loved her enough to ensure their son would understand the value of everything he'd ever earn? Your mother is still alive, Mr. Dawson. You can give her comfort now. But tell me, would you trade the man you became for an easier childhood? Would you be able to handle $60 million if you hadn't earned and lost $4 million of your own first?" The truth of it hit me like cold water. Every lesson, every struggle, every 16-hour day building my company had prepared me for this moment. Not the moment of receiving wealth, but the moment of understanding what wealth actually meant. My father hadn't just left me money. He'd left me the ability to handle it. I didn't cash out everything. I took $15 million, enough to pay off Mom's assisted living for life, set up Emily's college fund, and start over. The rest stays invested, growing like Dad intended. David helped me structure it smart, setting up trusts and foundations, making sure this money would work for generations, not just years. The first thing I did was drive to Mom's facility in a rented car, still wearing my gas station uniform, because I wanted her to see where I'd been before I told her where I was going. She was sitting by the window, watching birds at the feeder like she always did. "Mikey," she said, her face lighting up. "You look different. Lighter somehow." "Mom, Dad left us something," I told her, taking her hands. They were so small now, marked with age spots and years of hard work. "He made an investment a long time ago. We're going to be okay. Your father was always investing," she said, confusing me until she continued. "Not in stocks or companies, in people. In you, in Brian, in every customer who couldn't afford repairs." She smiled that knowing smile mother's perfect over decades. "Whatever he left, Mikey, I'm not surprised. That man never made a decision without thinking 10 steps ahead." Laura called 17 times when the news hit the business journals. "We could work this out, Michael. For Emily's sake." Her voice had that calculated sweetness she used when she wanted something. I didn't return the calls, but I did send her a gift, a framed photo of the gas station where I'd worked, with a note, "Thanks for the education." Louise later told me she showed up there demanding to know where I was. He pretended not to speak English, one final favor from an unexpected friend. Dawson Logistics 2.0 launched 6 months later, but different this time. We specialize in small business shipping, helping startups who can't afford the big carriers. Companies like David's was back in 1990, all dreams and determination but no infrastructure. The business model barely breaks even, which drives my accountant crazy. "You could triple profits by taking corporate contracts," he reminds me weekly. "My dad could have cashed out for $6 million, I remind him back. Emily works with me on weekends now, learning the routes, understanding the relationships. At first, she came reluctantly, Laura's voice in her ear about how I was wasting my fortune. Then she met our clients, saw how a reliable shipping partner could make or break a small business. Dad, she said last week, I get it now. This isn't just about moving boxes. No, I told her. It's about moving possibilities. My brother Brian flew in from Tucson when I bought back Dad's old garage and turned it into our first distribution center. We found Dad's toolbox in the storage room, untouched for 20 years, still full. Inside the top drawer was another note, this one to both of us: tools don't make the craftsman, but a good craftsman takes care of his tools. Take care of each other. Brian runs the Tucson branch now. We're not trying to become huge, just useful. Every employee owns a piece of the company, a real piece, not the pretend equity Laura's lawyer made sure I couldn't give my original team. They all know the story about Frank Dawson and the napkin investment. It's become company mythology, a reminder that betting on people pays better than betting on profits. Karen Whitmore still checks in monthly, even though her official job was done a year ago. David Whitaker became an unofficial mentor, then an official board member, then something like family. Your father saved my dream, he told me over lunch last week. Now I watch you save others. It's a hell of a thing to witness. Last week, a young man came to my office. Lost his tech startup in a bad partnership, working as a delivery driver for us while figuring out next steps. He had an idea for revolutionizing last-mile delivery using AI routing, but no capital, no connections, just hunger and hand-drawn blueprints. I wrote him a check for $12,000. Why? He asked, confused. You don't even know if this will work. I pulled out the framed napkin agreement between David and my father, now hanging in every office of Dawson Logistics 2.0. Someone once told me that staying poor was a choice, I said. But being rich? That's about knowing when to bet on someone else's hunger. Consider this your napkin moment. Mom turns 74 next week. The dementia has gotten worse, but she has moments of perfect clarity. Yesterday she looked at me and said, "Your father would be so proud. Not of the money, Mikey. Of the man. You finally learned what he always knew, that success isn't what you have. It's what you help others build." She was right. Frank Dawson, the mechanic who died with $500 in his checking account, was the richest man I've ever known. He understood something Laura never will. You can take someone's business, their money, their reputation, but you can't take their capability to rebuild. You can't steal the lessons that losses teach. You can't divorce someone from their destiny. Dad didn't leave me a fortune. He left me something better, proof that rock bottom is just foundation if you know how to build. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever wondered whether your struggles have meaning, whether your losses might be lessons, then please share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment about a time when losing everything taught you who you really were. And subscribe to this channel for more stories about how life's hardest moments often carry its greatest gifts. Sometimes the best inheritance isn't what someone leaves you.